I just want to start at the very beginning, at the basic level for anybody who is scratching their head at why this is a story. Who is Mr. Beast?
Mr. Beast is basically the biggest YouTuber on the planet.
This is a bathtub full of snakes. Hey there, little guy.
He has the biggest following of any person. He is a celebrity to pretty much anybody who's younger than 15.
If any of you sits in this tub of snakes, I'll give your mom $10,000.
Sorry, Mom.
He didn't even let me finish and he left.
And he's just a legend on YouTube. You know, he's been doing it for 10 years now. He's really known for these big stunt videos where, you know, they'll set up a recreation of Squid Game and they'll do like, 100 people doing this very elaborate real world stunt.
I recreated every single set from Squid Game in real life. And whichever one of these 456 people survives the longest wins 456 grand.
He does big explosions. He does big giveaways. He is like a legend of YouTube.
I just bought this train and it is currently barreling full speed towards that giant pit over there.
He's not just a millionaire, but he has like the cultural cachet of basically any celebrity you can imagine. Anybody who knows YouTube as a place where stars are made, they know who Mr. Beast is.
Okay, so if all of that is new information to you, that's okay. I myself did not know who MrBeast was until maybe 5 years ago. I got a phone call from a woman who was asking about a podcast I'd done where I went almost to the top of a 2,000-foot tall television tower. That episode's called As High As You Can Get. It's in the same feed, July 2017. Check it out. Anyway, the woman said she was a producer and wanted to know how I'd gotten permission to go up on the tower, who to talk to, that sort of thing. She was polite, thorough, professional, and I tried to help her out. And when I asked who she was a producer for, she said MrBeast, and I had no idea who that was. MrBeast never did go up in a TV tower as far as I can tell. But that does not seem to have held him back. At this point, he has more than 300 million total subscribers on YouTube. And, now this is not a perfect comparison, but still, some of his videos have more views than the Super Bowl. He's opened restaurants. He's launched his own food company called Feastables. The MrBeast logo is now on the jerseys of the Charlotte Hornets. And I might add, MrBeast is 25 years old. And so you may be wondering, how did he do it? And where does he do it? What city is home to the headquarters of this man's media empire, the epicenter of the YouTube universe? The answer, Greenville, North Carolina. I know, right? Greenville, population 87,000 people, East Carolina University, Beast Barbecue, that place. MrBeast grew up right down the road and he has never left. He is a very big deal, but is there a way to measure just how big of a deal he is online and offline? So today we are going to try and figure that out by asking a ridiculous question with a complicated answer. How much of Greenville's economy relies on MrBeast? This is the North Carolina Rabbit Hole Podcast, a show about the strange minutiae of the greatest state in the nation. I'm Jeremy Markovich. So, the largest employer in Greenville is the hospital system there. Has more than 6,000 employees. ECU and Pitt County Schools are number 2 and 3 on the list. No real big surprises there. MrBeast, according to Forbes, employs about 250 people, which, if I had to guess, would put him somewhere within the top 30 employers in town. He also, according to Forbes, brought in $54 million in revenue in 2021. That's the most ever for a YouTuber. But How does YouTube translate over to real life, especially in Eastern North Carolina? Drew Harwell, who covers tech for the Washington Post, spent a week down here trying to figure that out. And so I gave Drew a call.
The reason why I in particular am interested in him is because he is a North Carolinian, and you kind of think of these traditional power centers of media as being coastal. You think of maybe New York or Los Angeles, or even like just places where there's sort of like an infrastructure already, like here in North Carolina. For a very long time, and even continuing to this day, Wilmington is a place where a lot of television shows, movies were shot. And yet, here we have Greenville, North Carolina, as the epicenter of the MrBeast universe. So, how exactly did that happen?
That's, I think, one of the more fascinating things about MrBeast, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson. You think about Hollywood and now, what we call the creator economy, which is all these online influencers who are getting rich and attention off YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and all that. The life cycle for a lot of these people are, they grow up in a normal place and then they strike it big, or they want to strike it big, and like you said, they move to LA or Miami or New York, and they feel like that's the place where they have to be. With MrBeast, he grew up in Greenville. He started making YouTube videos out of his bedroom in, the Greenville suburbs, and never left. I mean, even as he started to get $1 million deals, millions of people watching him, he never felt like he had to move to another place to build that infrastructure. He basically just created the infrastructure on his own. So he went from, streaming himself playing Minecraft in his bedroom to, having these big studios and warehouses and hiring people to be on his staff and basically making his part of Greenville his own little Hollywood. And that rarely happens. It's starting to happen now more with more influencers of his scale, but the fact that he could kind of create his own power center away from all of these other more established places was just, I think, a fascinating reality of our internet today. You can get an audience online from anywhere, and you can bring in people from anywhere. And so I just found that a really kind of interesting wrinkle about, American life on the internet nowadays. He didn't have to go anywhere. He could just stay in Greenville.
So you went to Greenville and
Yep.
and took a closer look.
Yeah, my colleague Taylor Lorenz and I both spent a little less than a week in Greenville, and we flew in, we stayed in town, we drove all around cafes, restaurants, bars, libraries, grocery stores, talking to anybody and everybody. So I'd been to North Carolina plenty. I grew up in Florida. I worked for the Washington Post, but I travel for stories, and I love North Carolina. And Greenville really reminded me of Gainesville, which was the college town I went to. I went to University of Florida, and it was just, there's this big concentric circle of rural life, and then you have, that inner core of just kind of an old-timey city with college nightlife, and then in between you have lots of just normal people, working people, even just down to like the brick buildings and the streets and the young people everywhere. So it just felt very familiar to me. And the part that kind of was surprising was like it would be that familiar part of a southern college town, but then there'd be like a Lamborghini driving down, Main Street, or there'd be like people whispering and talking about just this like celebrity who basically lives in town and is, the only celebrity in town, and it's just like this massive global, like not even just any celebrity, but like the celebrity of YouTube. And so that's what I found really interesting. And, even more than that, of just like having a rich icon in town, was that, he has become a real employer. Like, a lot of young people want to work with him. They're constantly putting up job listings to work for MrBeast. They're always hiring editors, videographers, camera people, producers, writers, but even down to like the people who will assemble the stunts, right, and build the sets, people who will clean up after the explosions. And so he struck me as just like a legitimate, not just a small business, but like a medium-sized business that was bringing in people from out of town. And so there were just those like reminders all around town. So it was just like the backdrop was this very kind of traditional American city, and yet it was had all of these like constant reminders that there was internet royalty around.
I think I was sort of joking a while back when I was wondering aloud, like how much of Greenville's economy is dependent on MrBeast. And I even went so far as to like ask around a couple of economic development officials out there and I didn't really hear back from them. But when it comes to the economic development of Greenville, when it comes to like the people who are in charge of monitoring the economy or seeing sort of how businesses work and work with each other in these places, where does MrBeast fit into that?
At the start, he is a real solid employer. Like he employs dozens of people, if not more than 100 people. I think 150 was the last number I remember. And these are, good jobs. These are creative jobs. These are jobs that people will move from out of town into. These are jobs that, East Carolina University, ECU, like they are creating a program to basically do occupational training for young people who want to be doing influencer stuff for the rest of their life. And so they're doing like training. So, these aren't like runt jobs, which is what I found really interesting. Not only is he paying people, but he's also bringing in a lot of money from advertisers and YouTube from out of town. So he's injecting that into the local economy. When we first got interested in this, we learned that, he had bought up these 5 houses around this one cul-de-sac in the suburbs outside Greenville. And it was described as like, oh, MrBeast is making Greenville into a company town. Like everybody's going to go there. They're going to be paid in MrBeast script, right? It's going to be like he's going to dominate the town. And it's not that overbearing. Like, you can still go into Greenville, and a lot of people still live in Greenville, don't know who MrBeast is. It's not like his face is on every sign. And yet, when you compare him to some of the other sort of local town employers that are big companies, he really ranks up there among them, certainly in terms of revenue, but also just in terms of like the employment base. And when we went, I was, I'm always sort of nervous that I'm going to go and they're going to be a total blip, and I've gone to places, including, across the South where there are, online influencers who make a lot of money, but they basically don't leave home, right? All the money just goes into their bank account. They don't have some presence. They work from home, so even their neighbors would not know. But this was different because Jimmy and MrBeast have really tried to make it like they are an omnipresent presence in Greenville. And part of that is just because they need to go do these stunts. They film a lot of like real world things where they'll surprise people, they'll do challenges, they'll hand out money on campus or so part of that is like they're just going to appear, and so people are always talking about like when's he going to show up, and there's a kind of like weird almost lottery like spirituality to it. They're just like maybe Jimmy will show up, So I just found that really interesting. But even beyond the kind of like spectacle of it, there is a really legitimate, just normal business here. There's money coming in from advertisers. It goes through MrBeast. That manifests itself in terms of people on the payroll, people making merchandise, buying merchandise, selling it. So it just struck me as like, this is a legitimate business. And that was part of the project why we wanted to do this in the first place, which is that when we talk about online influencers, we're always poo-pooing them. Like we dismiss them so much because, they're on the internet, they're on TikTok and YouTube, who cares? But these are real cultural juggernauts, certainly for young people, but for people of all ages. These are the new kinds of celebrities, and they're kind of reinventing the way we pick up on culture in this country in ways that we don't always really appreciate. And so with MrBeast, it was like, not only is he really culturally resonant, but he's also kind of changing the shape of this town and bringing a lot of money in that they otherwise wouldn't be able to count on.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on that a little bit more because a while back, Governor Roy Cooper in North Carolina was talking about film and movie incentives. He tweeted something, and MrBeast's response was like, that's not a whole lot. My budget for my videos is even bigger than that. And even more recently, you have Elon Musk saying you should put your videos, you should debut them on, what we all call Twitter now. And he's like, buddy, the economics don't work. Like, what do you think is behind this still maybe struggle with people who look at what somebody on the scale of MrBeast is doing and saying, like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't know why people would watch this or why he's popular or why him or why Greenville versus like the actual real world influence and power that he has? What do you think might be behind that divide?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is just how the idea that we do dismiss influencers, and they are so new. They appeal to young people. For people who are watching MrBeast videos for the first time, it's a lot. And if you've never seen one and you watch one, you will know what I'm talking about. There's a lot. These are 10-minute videos, and there is something new happening basically every 5 seconds. It's just like a tidal wave to the brain. We look at that and we're like, oh, what are the kids watching these days? And we've had plenty of moral panics over the years in terms of rock music, to TV, to video games, to now, online creators, where it just doesn't get it. It doesn't seem like the culture and media we've grown up with, so we don't maybe understand it. But a lot of work goes into it. And, with MrBeast especially, his whole cult of personality has been that, for years he's said the money I make is going to go right back into my videos. I want to make the best videos ever. I want to dominate the YouTube algorithm. And, for a time it was just like sort of puffing up his chest thing, but he basically does now. He runs YouTube. His videos get tens of millions. I mean, he's just on another level compared to even newspapers, film studios. They all look to MrBeast to see, like, how do we replicate that kind of virality? The internet is not an easy place to go consistently viral. And so the fact that he can do it. And so, but yeah, I mean, his budgets are astronomical. I mean, they really do spend millions of dollars per video. And these videos have a lot going. There's explosions, there's full on really sophisticated film sets. I mean, they hire people basically off of traditional Hollywood TV film sets to kind of replicate that. And so I don't think there's a total understanding how much work and labor and money goes into these things. And part of it is that these videos are just on YouTube. They're free. They just sort of drop onto the internet. We don't have the Oscars and the Golden Globes and the Emmys. We don't have the movie posters, the trailers. There's this decades long history of how we think about mass media in this country, that the creator economy hasn't really caught up to that. And so we don't put that level of appreciation of how much goes into it yet. But for the young people who watch MrBeast all the time, they sort of feel like nobody else gets it, right? Like they just don't appreciate how much goes into this. So I think it was interesting even seeing him say that to Elon Musk, because he's a businessman first. He knows the money that goes into these productions. And we talked about this in the story, but he seems to really take it very seriously. He talks about how he basically drives himself crazy doing these videos because so much goes into them. And, he's doing 90-hour work weeks and all this crazy stuff. So that is one thing. Even if you don't appreciate the style of the video and you don't want to watch, explosions and stuff like that, you really do have to appreciate the work that goes into them.
As you say, that there's a lot of people working for him. He's putting in a lot of long hours. They're doing really big, crazy things. Do you have a sense of what it is like to work for him?
It's punishing. Yeah, it sounds like a very difficult place to work. And part of that is, like you said, the level of detail, the amount of just crazy stuff they get into, the fact that he is extremely competitive and prone to overwork. And a lot of the people we talked to in town were saying, we know of people who have gotten burnt out. They took on a job and it was just too much. And, one person had even said, like, basically everybody who goes on there stays 90 days and leaves, except for the real, like, diehards. And, part of that is life at the top of the media food chain, right? And we hear these stories about directors who are hard to work with in Hollywood and tough film sets. And it's not a cop out to say these are always hard places to work. If you think about like who the top level director is in Hollywood, and if people were to say, well, it's a hard job to work, people would say, well, but you're still working for this amazing director, right? Like, of course it's going to be hard, but everybody is dying to have that job. And so that's kind of what you hear about with MrBeast. But that being said, when you think about this as a new industry that is unregulated, that is very competitive, that has a lot of young people wanting to go in and take on these jobs, maybe not always understanding the workload that goes into them. I think it does, I start to think about the risks of the people who seeing this on YouTube as this kind of glamorous, fun house experience when really the work is extremely taxing. When you go onto a film set and you work, there's still labor standards, right? Some of which have had to be grinded out over many years of bad workplaces. The creator economy is not really at that point now where there are a lot of labor protections. And Mr. Beast seems like a professional. Like you said, he does have people, he has producers and writers and that kind of thing. But there are a lot of people wanting to be at his level who may not have those kinds of protections, even though they're doing the same kind of thing. And there's also, basically an arms race of wanting to create the even more viral videos, even more spectacular spectacles. And so you just throw all these things in a mix, and I think it can be pretty tough. But that being said, even the people who say they're overworked say it's worth it, right? Like I get to work for a guy who's doing the craziest stuff on YouTube. And a lot of these people are in their early 20s. They're doing things that they would never get a chance to do anywhere else. So that's just kind of part of what they're buying into. And, it's not for everybody, but for the people who really want to live that life, they seem to really enjoy it.
We've talked a lot about Mr. Beast and what he's done to Greenville. Has he put Greenville on the map, or is the nature of the internet just sort of like these things sort of happen where they happen, not really tethered to a place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are definitely people who will come from out of town to go to Greenville to work with Mr. Beast, or in hopes that they can work with Mr. Beast. And there are stories of like people who want to be part of the Mr. Beast clique who are, renting billboards and doing these crazy things to like get on their radar. And Greenville, people in the comments of some Mr. Beast videos will talk about Greenville. There's for the real Mr. Beast diehards, they know that Greenville is where these things happen. They see the backdrop of Greenville in a lot of these videos. Also, this is happening in a lot of places, but especially here, there is the ripple effect of creatives wanting to be a part of that, be close to the Mr. Beast thing. So we've heard about, even outside of Greenville and around North Carolina and Raleigh and all these other places where there are creators renting out spaces to do their own YouTube video shoots and shooting around town and really taking it seriously. So all that is really interesting. But the flip side, I know you got to this a little bit, is that Greenville does tend to fade into the background. If you're watching this on YouTube, you may know nothing but the name of Greenville. Like you may not be taking a trip with your family to Greenville just because it is the town of Mr. Beast. Families do this. I've heard of young people like demanding that their parents take them to Greenville so they can see these places. But the nature of the internet makes it so it just tends to be a backdrop. And so, when I was talking to the economic development people, they definitely see that labor effect. They do feel like they've been put on the map, and they just enjoy the cool factor. A lot of towns, most towns will never have the coolest guy on YouTube making videos within their borders. So like they're all for it. They don't have to do anything. They can just kind of get the halo of it. But I don't know that it's, if Mr. Beast goes away, will that flywheel keep going in Greenville, or is that just a function of just the real power center that he has created there? I think that's the bigger question.
Is there something about a small town the size of Greenville, and not necessarily talking about Greenville, but let's just say a town with roughly the same kind of population in any state versus a very large metropolitan area like a New York, like a Washington, D.C., a Chicago, where in Greenville, Mr. Beast is the largest thing in town. Like, people can make this idea that Greenville could be a company town because Mr. Beast is there and it's not that big, versus if Mr. Beast was, born and bred in Brooklyn, I don't know if there's any universe where you could say this person has taken over New York in the same way. And I'm wondering if just the nature of small town America, or even like medium-sized town America, makes something that is unique to Mr. Beast. Like, he can do what he's doing because there's not a whole lot going on in Greenville in a way that there are in other places, and where he can basically effectively be the biggest thing in town in a way that he wouldn't be able to do in other places.
Totally. I think if there were 100 celebrities on the size of Mr. Beast in town, it would not be this unique. And, if it was Mr. Beast in Brooklyn, it would just be different, because as much as these videos are kind of a product of the internet and they live on the internet, Greenville is really the fascinating thing is just like, it's just this normal town in the backdrop. He's doing these crazy things. He's lighting things on fire. He's building roller coasters. He's handing out $1 million. And it's all happening in this town where no one would suspect it. That just looks totally just run of the mill. And I think that's part of what made it so unusual and maybe so relatable, was that this was not some star-studded place. And I think that's kind of cool. There are young people who are growing up in their small to medium-sized towns and thinking like, I could be that in my town. It's not always going to be great. And as we show in the story, not everybody loves having like an explosive, weird YouTuber next door and all the problems that come with that. But like, this is for young people, like, this is the dream. You grow up in your town and you can become whatever you want. You don't have to move to New York or Hollywood. And I mean, the videos have really changed over time, but the early Mr. Beast videos are fascinating because it's just like him going up to, a panhandler on, a quiet road and like handing out a bunch of money. And it looks like every stoplight you would ever go to in a small southern town. And it's just like, that juxtaposition is what makes it unique. And I think maybe part of what sort of made him such a star to begin with.
Last thing.
Yeah.
So you were in Greenville for about a week, and that's an intensive process of reporting a story like that. But when you were not out there reporting a story, what'd you do? What did you see in town? What'd you enjoy? What were you up to when you were not chasing down a YouTuber?
Oh yeah, I drank beer every night, which is always a joy, and I tried to eat some barbecue. I'm a big barbecue fan, and yeah, just tried to like go around town and drive a lot. There was one day where I just basically drove my rental car around, the rural parts, and I had some ideas of places where he had, blown things up and built things. So I kind of wanted to see all these random spots, but I just kind of wanted to get the atmosphere. And it was a cool place. It's the kind of place that I love going to report, because it doesn't have that kind of hoity-toity facade where it's really hard to walk up to people. These reporting trips are so, as you know, they can be a little awkward because you're having to walk up to dozens of people and ask weird questions out of nowhere, saddle up next to people in restaurants and bars and bookstores. And I found it actually really kind of fun and easy. And I never felt like it was totally alien. It felt like this was a place where I could understand why people grow up here. They make their lives here, and even why somebody of his caliber would want to stay, right? Like, and maybe, and some of this is his personality, but I sort of get like why he would want to, keep it home here. There was a nice draw to it. So, but yeah, I ate a lot, I drank a lot, I got some gifts for the family, and just had a great time.
Many thanks to Drew Harwell of the Washington Post. He covers a lot of fascinating and frightening things about technology, AI, algorithms, all that stuff. You can find his work at drewharwell.com. Now, you can find more stories like this one by becoming a subscriber to the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. It's a reader-supported weekly newsletter that powers this podcast. It is free if you want it to be. Check it out at ncrabbithole.com. I'm Jeremy Markovich. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again soon.